At first, it seemed like any other tragic, random act of violence. A mother gunned down in the middle of the night, a life taken too soon. But as the details began to surface, the truth started to unravel, a truth far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. Aria Soren, a 30-year-old mother of 8, was killed in the parking lot of a nightclub on Dorchester Road, North Charleston. Her life was stolen away in what appeared to be a senseless shooting. But was it really that simple? Authorities quickly learned that Aria wasn't just another innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of street violence. Her death wasn't the result of an unknown thug with a gun, but rather, it was the result of a confrontation with someone she knew, someone who had a history of violent outbursts. Tasha Birch, a 39-year-old woman, turned herself in days after the shooting. She told investigators that she shot Aria in self-defense, but was that the real story? Or had something darker unfolded between these two women in the moments leading up to the gunfire? Was this just a tragic mistake? Or did something about Aria's death have roots in something far more personal, something both women carried with them long before that fateful night? To understand why one woman's life was cut short, we have to look deeper, not just into that night, but into the years of build-up. What drove Tasha to take such a drastic step? And what did Aria, an ambitious, strong-willed mother, do in her final moments that could have led to this deadly clash? Was this just an isolated incident? Or was there a dangerous pattern of aggression and violence that finally came to a head? Was Aria's death truly the result of self-defense? Or was it an act of fury, one that ended the life of a woman who, despite her struggles, lived with an unshakable faith in God and a deep love for her children? Stick with us as we dig deeper into the lives of these two women, their pasts, their choices, and the shocking moment that changed everything. This is a story of tragedy, yes, but also one of faith, violence, and the terrible cost of an argument that spiraled out of control. If you want to hear more gripping crime tales, make sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Don't miss out on the next chapter of this mystery, and stay with us as we uncover the truth behind these chilling events. Before Aria Soren became a victim in a violent confrontation, she was a woman who, by all accounts, lived her life with purpose. Aria had dreams, a family, and a deeply rooted faith that shaped who she was. Raised by her grandmother, Vivian Ferguson, Aria's early life was one of love, guidance, and a strict sense of right and wrong. Vivian Ferguson, a woman whose faith and wisdom were the backbone of the Soren family, took Aria in at a young age, raising her with values that many might call old-fashioned today. Vivian was a woman who believed deeply in the teachings of the church and the importance of family. From the moment Aria was born, she was surrounded by this unwavering support. Vivian taught Aria the importance of forgiveness, hard work, and most importantly, faith in God. Every Sunday, the two would attend church together, where Aria learned the teachings of Jesus Christ, lessons that would guide her even in the toughest times. It was through this lens of faith that Aria came to understand the world around her, that love, not violence, was the answer to life's challenges. Aria went on to have 8 children, each one a testament to her dedication to family and her desire to create a life for them that was better than what she had. Despite facing hardships, including the heartbreaking loss of one of her twins, Aria never wavered in her role as a mother. She was the protector, the teacher, and the rock her children needed. For them, she was more than just a mother. She was a symbol of strength, love, and resilience. Yet, as with many things in life, the struggles Aria faced weren't always visible to the outside world. Her relationship with Tasha Birch, the woman who would ultimately take her life, was more complicated than it seemed. It wasn't just a random confrontation, but rather the culmination of a series of heated moments, tensions that had been building for months. To understand the night Aria was killed, we must go back to the events leading up to it. Aria wasn't just any victim. She was a woman with her own past, her own struggles, and a complex relationship with Tasha, the woman who would pull the trigger. Despite Aria's deep faith, she was no stranger to conflict. And it wasn't just with Tasha. Aria's outspoken nature often led to disagreements. But there was something different about her relationship with Tasha. The two women had been involved in an argument the night before the shooting, and though details of that argument are still unclear, it's believed to have been the tipping point, the spark that ignited a much darker chain of events. In the hours before her death, Arya shared a poignant message on social media. In a post she made on Snapchat, she said, "Time is short. I think we all should take more pictures and memories because you just never know." It was a cryptic message that, in hindsight, now feels like a haunting premonition of the tragedy that was about to unfold. But what led to this fateful moment? What could have caused Arya and Tasha to clash in such a way that one of them ended up dead? To understand that, we have to look at the background of Tasha Birch, the woman who fired the fatal shot. While Arya's life was defined by faith, family, and love, the same cannot be said for Tasha Birch. To understand why Arya ended up on the receiving end of a fatal bullet, we need to explore the woman who fired that shot. Tasha Birch, 39 years old, had lived a life far removed from Arya's world of faith and devotion. While Arya had been raised by her grandmother in a loving, faith-driven household, Tasha's upbringing was marked by a far more tumultuous and violent past. From an early age, Tasha was no stranger to conflict, and it seemed that aggression was often her first response to adversity. Tasha's history reveals a troubling pattern. She had been involved in several violent incidents over the years, each one more serious than the last. Whether it was fights with family members, altercations with strangers, or even legal trouble, Tasha's life seemed to be a series of violent outbursts. By the time the fatal shooting occurred, she had already shown a history of aggression that many had dismissed, but perhaps should have been taken more seriously. Despite her history, Tasha had been able to fly under the radar, not facing serious consequences for her actions. She was known to have a fiery temper and a quick fuse, someone who didn't back down from confrontation. She had been in and out of relationships, each marked by tension and disputes, and her friends and family described her as someone who could be charming one moment and explosive the next. And yet, there was another side to Tasha that wasn't as readily apparent. She had children of her own, and though her violent tendencies were well known, she would often express regret for her actions, especially when it came to her kids. She wanted to be a good mother. But the question remains, could a person who had already displayed such violent behavior really control her impulses in the heat of an argument? As the days went by leading up to the shooting, tensions between Tasha and Arya had been escalating. The two women were not strangers. They had crossed paths before. Their relationship was complicated, marked by tension, misunderstandings, and, at times, open conflict. Tasha's violent history wasn't just an abstract thing. It was a constant presence in her life. It was only a matter of time before her temper flared again. This time, it would be during an argument with Arya, a confrontation that would end in tragedy. But what sparked this deadly argument? And what went wrong in that parking lot on the night of July 28th? Could it have been the result of a simple disagreement? Or was there something more to their relationship? Something darker that finally came to the surface? What was it about that night that pushed Tasha to make a decision that would cost Arya her life? To answer these questions, we need to take a closer look at the night of the shooting itself, the argument that led to the tragic encounter, and the explosive events that followed. At 2:19 a.m., the scene outside the Bloom Room was like any other late night in North Charleston. A mix of dimly lit parking lots, the hum of cars, and groups of people starting to wind down their evening. What wasn't expected, however, was the tragic altercation that would unfold in that very parking lot, leaving a mother of 8 dead and a community searching for answers. Arya Soren had stepped outside the nightclub that night. She wasn't alone. Tasha Birch, the woman who would soon become the center of a police investigation, was also present. The details surrounding their encounter are murky, but what is clear is that a confrontation between the two quickly turned deadly. We know the argument began in the parking lot, but what caused it? Was it a simple disagreement between two women with a strained history? Or was there something more? The truth, as it often is in these cases, is a bit more complicated. Tasha and Arya had known each other for a while, though their relationship was anything but smooth. According to those who knew them, their interactions were often fraught with tension. It's likely that the confrontation that night wasn't just a random clash. It may have been the breaking point in a long-simmering conflict. It seems that Arya had come to the Bloom Room to escape her daily challenges, to find a moment of peace in a busy life. For Tasha, however, it wasn't just about a night out, it was about making sure her voice was heard, and in that moment, her anger overtook her. Witnesses report hearing shouting moments before shots rang out. But what were they arguing about? Some said the argument was triggered by a personal insult, others claimed it was about an old grudge, but no one can say for sure. What we do know is that Tasha became increasingly agitated. The loud voices soon turned into physical movement, with Tasha claiming she felt threatened. But Arya? She didn't have a weapon. She didn't even carry a purse that night. Then, in an instant, it happened. In a moment of anger, Tasha pulled out a gun, and before anyone could react, she fired. A single shot echoed through the parking lot, followed by a series of panic moments, confusion, and then silence. Arya, struck by the bullet, collapsed to the ground, the life draining from her body in seconds. By the time officers arrived, it was already too late. Arya was rushed to a nearby hospital, but her injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead, the victim of a tragedy that was, at its core, preventable. Arya's family, especially her grandmother Vivian Ferguson, struggled to understand how a simple altercation between two women could spiral so quickly into such irreversible violence. Vivian had raised Arya with one core value: faith. Her granddaughter had always been the type to resolve conflict with words, never with violence. To her, the idea that Arya had been shot was inconceivable. Vivian had always taught Arya the importance of compassion, of turning the other cheek. She knew her granddaughter as someone who valued life, someone who believed in the goodness of others, even in difficult situations. But that night, in that parking lot, her faith and her love weren't enough to protect her from Tasha's anger. Tasha's version of events, though, was a stark contrast. She claimed self-defense. She said Arya was the one who became aggressive. She claimed she felt cornered and in danger, and in the heat of the moment, she fired the gun. However, as the evidence mounted, a key question lingered: was it truly self-defense, or was it a decision made in a moment of uncontrolled rage? After Tasha turned herself in, she was charged with manslaughter. The investigators reviewed her previous encounters with the law and found a disturbing pattern. Her temper had often led to violent confrontations. What they discovered, in hindsight, was that Tasha had long struggled with controlling her emotions. And on that night, in a moment where she could have walked away, she made a choice, a deadly one. Arya, a mother of 8, had been the pillar of her family. Her children were left to navigate a world without her, carrying with them the memory of a mother who had tried to teach them the value of life, even as she lost her own in a senseless act of violence. Days after the tragic shooting, the ripples of loss and confusion began to spread far beyond the parking lot of the Bloom Room. Arya Soren was dead, and for her family, the reality of her loss set in like a storm cloud, unrelenting and impossible to ignore. Vivian Ferguson, Arya's grandmother, had raised her with unwavering love and a faith that centered on peace. For Vivian, Arya's death wasn't just a loss. It was a betrayal of everything she had taught her granddaughter. Vivian knew Arya as a woman of strength, a mother who had fought to give her children a better life. To her, Arya was not the aggressor that Tasha painted her to be. 8 children were left behind, now deprived of the mother they adored. They were young, but the grief they carried was too heavy for their shoulders. Vivian held them close, offering solace in the only way she knew how, through prayer and stories of the woman they had lost. But how could a mother of 8 be taken away so violently? How could a night out with friends end in tragedy? Meanwhile, in the investigation, the police struggled to unravel the truth. Witnesses were scarce, and those who were present at the scene offered conflicting reports. What they didn't know was that Arya had no weapon. She hadn't been the one to escalate the fight. As the evidence slowly came together, it became clear that there was no justification for Tasha's actions. No self-defense, no imminent danger. The argument that had led to the shooting was just that, an argument. The police soon learned more about Tasha Birch's history, a pattern of aggression and violence that stretched beyond this incident. Tasha had previous run-ins with the law, though none as serious as this one. She had been known to have a short temper, and those who knew her described her as quick to anger. It was becoming apparent that the shooting wasn't about defending herself. It was about a momentary loss of control, a reaction to being challenged by Arya. Tasha's defense was that she feared for her life. But as the investigation continued, the inconsistencies in her story became more evident. No one could confirm that Arya had been armed or even threatening in any way. Arya's family and friends knew her better than anyone. She wasn't the type to provoke a violent encounter. What was even more unsettling was Tasha's history. She had been involved in previous altercations, some involving threats and violent outbursts. Yet, none of these incidents had escalated to the point of lethal force. It was clear that for whatever reason, Tasha felt the need to end this disagreement with a gun. Vivian Ferguson wasn't one to back down. Despite the grief, she immediately started demanding justice for Arya. For her, this wasn't just about mourning the loss of a granddaughter. It was about holding Tasha accountable for taking the life of someone who was simply trying to live. Vivian would not let Arya's legacy be tarnished by lies or distorted truths. In every interview, in every press release, she spoke of Arya's character, of a woman who loved her children, who loved her community, and who didn't deserve to die like this. On August 11th, 2023, Tasha Birch turned herself into the authorities. She was arrested and charged with manslaughter, as well as possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The charges were serious, but the question remained: would the justice system hold Tasha accountable for ending Arya's life? Months after Arya Soren's tragic death, the case entered the most crucial phase: the legal battle. The fight for justice had already taken its emotional toll on Arya's family. But what was about to unfold in the courtroom would challenge their resolve even more. Arya's family was relentless in their pursuit of justice. They couldn't fathom how Tasha Birch, someone they believed was directly responsible for their loved one's death, could be allowed to evade true accountability. The courtroom became the battleground where they would fight for the truth to be heard. Vivian Ferguson, Arya's grandmother, was the emotional heart of this fight. As the mother of Arya's mother, Vivian had been the guiding force in Arya's life. Her unwavering faith and deep love for Arya fueled every word she spoke in court. But there was one thing Vivian would never forget. Arya's tragic death didn't come from a moment of self-defense. It came from a moment of reckless, impulsive violence. Tasha Birch's defense team stood firm in their claims that Tasha had acted out of fear. The argument was clear. In that moment of confrontation, Tasha was defending herself against a perceived threat. But as the trial continued, cracks began to appear in this narrative. Eyewitnesses were adamant that Arya was not a violent person, and there was no indication that she had initiated the conflict. Eyewitness testimonies were key in challenging the defense's claims. The people who had been present that night painted a different picture, one of a heated argument that quickly escalated when Tasha lost control. What started as a verbal exchange between the two women rapidly turned into an act of violence, a single gunshot that changed everything. Tasha's choice to pull the trigger wasn't driven by fear, but by something else, a quick decision to silence the conflict forever. And then there was Tasha's history. Evidence of previous violent outbursts surfaced in the courtroom. Several past confrontations have been documented, showing a pattern of someone who did not hesitate to escalate minor arguments into violent altercations. It became increasingly clear to the jury that Tasha's actions that night weren't an isolated incident. They were the culmination of a temper that had flared many times before. Vivian Ferguson, standing outside the courthouse, spoke of her disbelief. "She was my granddaughter," she said. "She didn't deserve to die like that." Vivian couldn't understand how someone like Tasha could so casually end another person's life. For Vivian, the question wasn't whether or not Tasha was afraid. It was whether Tasha had the right to make the split-second decision to take someone's life over a disagreement. The prosecution, now with mounting evidence against Tasha, delivered a powerful closing argument. They painted a picture of a woman who had let her temper dictate her actions, someone who felt entitled to resolve a minor argument with lethal force. The prosecutor emphasized that this wasn't a case of self-defense, It was a case of unjustifiable violence. Tasha's defense tried to sway the jury, arguing that her actions were driven by fear, a sudden and overwhelming sense of danger. They begged the jury to consider that in a heated moment, anyone might make a decision they later regret. But despite the defense's efforts, the testimony from witnesses and Tasha's violent history seemed to overshadow any claim of self-defense. With all the evidence presented and emotions running high, the jury began their deliberation. It was now up to them to decide. Was this an act of self-defense? Or was this the result of reckless, impulsive violence that cost Arya Soren her life? For Vivian, this moment was a test of faith. After all that had happened, all the heartbreak, could the justice system truly deliver accountability? Could the people who had taken her beloved granddaughter from her really face the consequences? With the weight of this decision on their shoulders, the jury filed back into the courtroom. What would they say? What would the verdict be? The truth, it seemed, was still within reach, but would the law see it? The moment of truth had finally arrived. After days of intense testimony, emotional outbursts, and mounting pressure, the jury had reached its decision. What would the outcome be? Would justice be served for Arya Vivian Soren? Or would Tasha Birch walk free, her deadly actions explained away as self-defense? The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation as the doors opened, and everyone held their breath, waiting for the verdict. The judge called for silence. All eyes were on the jury foreman as he stood, papers in hand, ready to deliver the decision that would change everything. The fate of Tasha Birch, the woman accused of taking a mother of 8 from her children, now rested in their hands. The foreman's voice echoed throughout the courtroom, the words resonating with every person present. We, the jury, find the defendant, Tasha Birch, guilty of manslaughter. The room seemed to freeze for a moment, as the weight of that single word hung in the air. Manslaughter, an admission of guilt, but not the full measure of justice that many had hoped for. For Arya's family, the verdict was bittersweet. Relief flooded their hearts at the conviction, but it was tempered by the realization that Tasha would not face the harsher charges of murder. Manslaughter, an acknowledgement of the loss, but not of the severity they felt Arya's death deserved. Vivian Ferguson, Arya's grandmother, held herself together as the verdict was read, but the pain was undeniable. The justice they had hoped for was elusive. Tasha Birch, sitting stone-faced as the verdict was delivered, showed no sign of emotion. It was as though the years of legal proceedings, the endless hours spent defending her actions, had led to this moment, this compromise between justice and tragedy. For Tasha, the conviction was a reminder of the consequences of that fateful night, but it was not the total loss she had feared. Manslaughter carried a significant sentence, but not the same weight as murder. The courtroom was filled with mixed reactions. Some members of Arya's family embraced each other, grateful that Tasha would not be allowed to walk free. But others, like Vivian Ferguson, felt a deep sense of injustice. They had lost Arya in the most brutal way, her life snatched away, leaving her children to grow up without their mother. And now, despite the conviction, they still felt that the justice they had fought for didn't fully match the magnitude of their loss. Outside the courthouse, Vivian Ferguson spoke to the gathered media. Her voice was filled with both sorrow and strength as she said, "We got justice, but it's not enough. Arya was my granddaughter. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be taken from us this way. I just want our children to know that we fought for her, that we didn't give up." For Arya's children, the legal proceedings had been a blur of emotions, difficult to understand, but important to witness. They had heard their mother's name in the courtroom, and now they would hear the word guilty, but it was not a word that would ease the hole left in their hearts. They had lost their mother, and no verdict, no sentence could bring her back. The trial had captured the attention of North Charleston, the town where the tragedy unfolded. Arya Soren wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, a friend, a beloved member of the community. Her death had shaken the entire area, and the trial had only heightened the division over the use of deadly force in moments of conflict. As the community processed the verdict, debates flared up. Was manslaughter enough? Was it right for Tasha Birch to be charged with something less than murder? given the circumstances of the shooting? Activists and community leaders weighed in, with some arguing that the justice system had failed to provide full accountability for Aria's death, while others saw it as a fair conclusion to a complex case. For Vivian Ferguson, the fight was far from over. In her heart, she knew that this trial had not just been about legal definitions. It was about honoring Aria's memory, protecting her children, and ensuring that future generations would know the true story of Aria Soren. Her granddaughter's death had sparked a legal battle, but it also sparked something else, a renewed commitment to fight for what was right, no matter how long it took. As the legal battle came to a close, life for Aria's children was still far from normal. They would never get back what they had lost. The absence of their mother was something they would have to carry with them forever. But Aria had taught them about strength, about love, and about faith. These lessons would be their anchor as they moved forward, always remembering their mother as the woman who loved them unconditionally, no matter the circumstances. The verdict had been reached, but the real question remained. Had justice truly been served? For Aria's family, the road to healing was just beginning. But one thing was certain, Aria Soren would never be forgotten. Her story, her legacy, would live on in the hearts of those who loved her, and in the ongoing fight for justice in her name. If you're intrigued by this case and want to dive deeper into stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It helps you stay updated whenever we release a new true crime tale. And if you're already subscribed, give this video a thumbs up to let us know you want more chilling mysteries like this. Your support helps us continue bringing you the stories that need to be told.